Hello everyone. Welcome to already our third Major Things live stream. Uh, First of all, I hope you had a lovely Wednesday. We have another really exciting program on the menu for you guys. So, a little bit about Major Things. Since September, the third year animation students at the Willem de Koning Academy have been working on their first big self-initiated project. I was one of the tutors. You'll be meeting the other tutor during the Q&A. Last year, what we saw was that a lot of people were working on like video games or VR experiences. This year, we saw that a lot more people were working on more traditional animations. Some dabbled in live action, others dabbled in like mixed media filmmaking. But basically, they had like the freedom to create whatever they wanted to make. So we had like really bold experimental films, but we also had like some more smaller introspective and personal films. Despite the existential questions that Barons or I would like throw their way, or despite the really strange conditions under which the students all had to work, lockdown, quarantine, and all of these things, and also despite the endless or the seemingly endless quest to find like that one perfect internship, they all managed to produce interesting or beautiful or compelling things that they did for their major, hence the name Major Things. Today we'll be going back to the basics. We'll be focusing on sort of like the pre-production phase of an animated production. So think animatics, think sketches, think animation tests. What is really required in order for you to really get going with your animated film? Of course, like with live action, there's this notion that the film is created a couple of times during the writing process, during the shooting, and during the editing. But with animation, it's a little bit different because like the editing mostly happens in the beginning. You don't want to like have an animator work on a scene for a week or a month and then have to throw it away at the very end. So you have to make all of these choices in the very beginning. And today we'll be joined by a couple of filmmakers who will be sharing their process and will be sharing what that beginning looked like to them. So yeah, without further ado, here are some of their beginning phases. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hello there. I'm Angela Klinger, but people know me as Kira. You will be seeing my newest storyboarding project I title My Moons and Stars. It is a small scene from a Thai epic called the Ramakien. The short is made for those who already sort of know the story, as it is a Thai piece of literature, like a very classical one, and a big part of the population has at least read it once in school at some point during their life. But to give you the short of it, it is about the protagonist, Hanuman, the white monkey god who rescues his master who had been captured by a sea demon. As Hanuman is on his way to the rescue, he runs into the sea demon's guard, dwelling within the pond, who introduces himself as Machanu, the son of Hanuman. He does not believe that the monkey before him is his proclaimed father, so they fight. Hanuman ends up proving his identity by breathing forth moons and stars, an ability only reserved to gods like him. As the fight between the two is a big part of the short, I did plenty of research into the cinematic languages of fight scenes, even consulting with a professional I am currently interning with whose speciality are fight sequences. With his input, I created several storyboard versions, trying to find different ways to tell the same thing, trying to find the most optimal way, if you will. The version you will see is version number 5. I added some scrap audio, no voice lines, but Foley so it wouldn't be completely silent. With that, I say goodbye and hope you enjoy.
My name is Schets. I am a stop-motion animator and I will be taking you through my process of this project. I wanted to challenge myself by stop-motion animating two characters interacting with each other. I created these character designs of a father and a daughter, and based upon these I made the actual puppets. Starting with clay sculpts that I then used for making the molds. In the metal workshop I constructed all the parts for the ball and socket armatures, which of course had to be fitted into the molds and then to be casted. For this I used foam latex for the first time, which was quite a messy process, with some trial and error where the latex would either gel way too quickly or not at all. I eventually got it right and ready for the oven. They come out as these kind of disturbing looking pancakes, and after drying and trimming the edges, the puppets are painted and ready for shooting, where the characters really come to life.
Hi, I'm Jarle, an animator with a lot of different interests. Besides animating, I like making a lot of different things, from paintings to music with my hurdy-gurdy. I love making atmospheric environments. In the last project, I wanted to create an environment with an old ruin and a lot of atmosphere. I was always good in sculpting traditionally, and I wanted to see if I could translate this skill to 3D. I challenged myself to learn 3D from scratch in a few months. First, I made some concept art to have a basic idea for the building that I wanted to make. It's loosely based on Roman architecture, because I like history. Then I started working in Blender, a free 3D software with a lot of cool features. This was a hard process with a lot of technical problems while learning. I started with a low poly base before adding details. It was a lot of trial and error, but in the end I managed to learn the basics of sculpting and modeling in 3D. My biggest challenge was learning how to create a few components and repeat them without it looking boring. Essentially, the building exists out of a few puzzle pieces that I could repeat and reuse. The learning process while creating the building was long, with also the necessary crashes, sadly. But after this long process, I rendered a few images. While fixing the colors in Blender, I accidentally created this image, because I only had the pillars selected. I actually liked the colors and atmosphere so much that I used it as a reference for my other pictures. The colors from the rendered pictures from Blender were not always the right color I wanted it to have. Therefore, I used this accidental rendered image as an inspiration while fixing the colors of the other pictures in Photoshop. This resulted in this final process video. Enjoy!
So, as we can see, lots of different projects, lots to see, but also lots to learn. I think it's a really unique opportunity to really like get to see these very fundamental and foundational steps of the process. We're in luck today. We have we're joined by all of the makers of these films. So we have Kira Klinger, we have Eva Schets, Zainab Kaddis and Jarle Andriessen. First of all, thank you so much for joining. And of course, we also have my fellow moderator, Barend Onnoer.
Yes. Well, Jonathan and I have been fortunate enough to have been coaching these students of ours from September on into creating a wide variety of projects. And tonight's selection, I guess, and that sounds maybe more. Well, I mean, what they all have in common is that they don't necessarily embody finished final projects, but and I see some people smiling, of course, but that then immediately introduces maybe the question, when did you maybe decide, or at what point did it become clear was that that you would only make, let's say, a subset or a partial project, or was that an idea from the start, or was that something that happened over time? And how do you feel about this? So maybe Kira wants to answer that first.
For me, it was an idea like way from the start, mostly because of what I wanted to do versus the amount of time that I would have to do it. So I decided to keep it at a different production step rather than saying, oh, I'm going to finish this in this amount of time.
Exactly. Your main interest was in let's say the sort of the longer form storytelling. I think at some point,
Definitely.
Sorry?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. And so then it was immediately clear that you wouldn't make a finished animated project, but you would focus on the cinematic storytelling. But still, over time, did your idea about what you would produce change, the scope or the?
Yesn't. It's a little bit yes, a little bit no. At the I know that mid-project, like I was kind of getting stuck and everything was sort of just becoming a little too much. So I decided to instead add something to it by trying to add some character designs for it, at least in the first run. But in the end, that was kind of me excusing my way out of things. So that in the reset, I decided, no, you're going to do this. You're going to focus on your visual storytelling. You're going to do it again, and you're going to do it right. And I would like to think that I did, even though in my internship, I learned so much in just a month that looking back at this is already embarrassing.
Really? Does it feel like that?
Yeah, a little bit. From like all the things that I've learned, I think, oh God, there's so much in there that I changed later.
How would you, or what would you change now to it, looking back at it?
There's a lot of shot angles that I could have done so much better, while there's a lot of shots that I think could have told more in just one single sort of composition, I suppose. And there's a lot of compositions that if I were to finish it, that made things way too difficult, or at least I could have made them easier for myself while still adding more what's it called? Adding more tension. There's so many so many sort of tricks that you can do in 2D storyboarding that you can't do in 3D or in real life, and I didn't take advantage of those. But that's what I would do now if I could, and I am.
But that sounds like, and I think it's important to look at all these projects as really as research and learning processes. Of course, hopefully we'll keep learning, for the rest of our lives. That's the common cliche nowadays. But I think specifically for these, So Eva, at what point in the project was it always meant to be sort of, let's say, a couple of shots, or did you originally set out to make the whole film? And at what point did you then maybe decide to not?
For me, I never intended it to be like a fully fleshed out like film. I always thought of it as making some short scenes of my two characters interacting. But I did very much misjudge the amount of time that it would take me to actually make the two puppets from scratch. Also, not having in mind the very little amount of time that we would actually have with these times at school to take to use the facilities at school. Because, for example, for my armatures, I needed about a week of time to at least make like the small parts and cut all the parts in a metal workshop. But because you had to plan when you would work there, and you were only allowed for a set amount of hours to be there each week, because there were like only 6 people allowed to be there at one time. So in the end, I was only able to be in the metal workshop for at most like 2.5 days a week. So I ended up having to take 3 weeks total to finish my armatures instead of just one, just because I had to spread it out between 3 weeks. So that took a lot more time than I thought it would.
Yeah. And what about sort of like if you have to think about the differences between setting up or the pre-production phase for like a traditional 2D animation and like a stop motion film? What are the main big differences there?
Well, for one, I had to set up like an actual studio environment at my parents' place. So I had to make sure I had a camera, lighting, a backdrop, stuff like that. And then with 2D, you normally make an animatic and you draw keyframes and stuff like that. And I did do that, or at least I drew some thumbnails and stuff like that for my animations. But after that, you work with your puppets. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. Do you prefer 2D pre-production versus stop motion pre-production? Which one is easier for you, or which one do you prefer doing?
Stop motion. It's what I do mainly. I haven't done like full 2D animation probably since like the first year, I think. So yeah. I started dabbling with stop motion during like January of the first year, and then it's just started building up more and more. Mm-hmm. And now I'm also doing my internship in the stop motion studio, so it's kind of all I think about now. So
you found your calling. Yeah.
Could say that. Yeah.
Jarle, when did you? I mean, I think from the start it was clear that you were going to make an environment and not so much, let's say, a full-on story But I think it's safe to say that in the end, you reduced the complexity of what you were presenting. At what point did you decide that, or how did you approach scaling down the project?
Probably when I noticed the technical difficulties in learning and also in the program. That it just would take way more time than just a few months to actually learn it. So then I started scaling down and really focusing on the building itself that I was making. So I could really focus on learning to model, which I also found out was could happen a lot more intuitively than very architectural thinking about the shapes and like using some little bit of math here and there to get the shape right. So that at that point I also found the enjoyment again. So I started focusing on the building on its own and adding atmosphere, which is my main focus, later on.
Yeah, you said enjoyment. You found sort of a way to sort of enjoy yourself within the tools you were learning from scratch, I guess. So I guess enjoyment, of course, is a big deal, especially in these days. Yeah. Were you sort of disappointed about doing less than you originally set out, or are you at this point at least feeling comfortable or happy about what you achieved?
I'm very comfortable with it because I can also show with this video that I learned the software decently, which is a small achievement for myself too. So in the beginning I was a bit disappointed, but now I am happy with it.
Does it feel like a finished product to you if you look at it?
If I look at that's the final part of my video, like the process video, it starts to look somewhat like a finished product. Mm-hmm. Especially when I added a bit of music here and there. And
right, I wanted to ask you about that because you're using this ancient sort of like musical instrument called the hurdy-gurdy.
Yes, perfectly. Yes, okay. Pronounced it quite right.
Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's basically the ancestor of a violin, where the strings are laying over a wheel, which you have to turn, and that's what produces the sound in different volumes depending on how hard you turn. And there's a few strings over it, and different sound combinations can come out of there. It's a bit like a violin, also a bit like a bagpipe, but
yeah.
You made the music yourself for the.
Oh yes, I did.
Yeah, I remember. I remember in the very beginning of this project, you were like, that was one of the things that you were really keen on, that of like, I'm going to make the music myself. I'm going to use the hurdy-gurdy. So eventually, it still ended up in there.
Yeah, I just decided to pick an old recording and pick up a newer recording. I'll record it with my phone, but I had fun, so I really wanted to put it out there because it's like a part of me very much. It's like the second thing I like besides art, I would say. So, well, actually, they're both important.
And they're both art, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, Zainab, did you originally set out to make the full scene, or was it always meant to be sort of a series of tests and rough animations?
Well, my goal was to make a dynamic 2D hand-drawn animated sequence. So a collection of dynamic shots. I actually wanted to do it in color at first, but I noticed that I didn't have so much time on my hands. And I actually really wanted to do something that I thought was fun, and that is doing the actual rough animation. and diving deeper in the animation principles and what I could do with them, and sort of going out of my comfort zone, because my previous works always were kind of static, and there wasn't a lot of movement in it, and most movement was kind of subtle. So I wanted to try something completely different, and I'm happy I did it, because I think it was really nice to actually use the knowledge I gained over the years, when it comes to animation, and really using that to make something challenging and also exciting.
Yeah, I mean, when we take a look at your process video, we're seeing like grids, and we're seeing like all of these different sort of like markings, and there's a lot of like we see you trying to like sort of like wrap your head around all of these animation principles. Which one was like the most hardest to sort of like, I don't know, understand or to hone?
Well, I was really putting a lot of thought in the run animation and how that works, because I had no clue how that worked. I only had done walk cycles and no runs. So I grabbed my animation Bible and started studying it like crazy. And the most challenging thing was that I actually animated a run in perspective. That was really hard. I had no clue what I was doing at first, but I did a lot of research, reading books like the Animation Survival Kit. That helped me a lot. In there, it said something about animating in perspective, and some tricks about that. So I used that and I applied it to my animation. So it was really fun.
Yeah, I think what you sort of, and I think what most of your projects sort of, as a result of choosing to not, let's say, complete it, but instead dive deeper into specific sort of sub challenges in a way. I guess that's what you all share in making that project. I think Kira mentioned, instead of making a longer animatic, actually redoing the same one and again to really dive into the depth of it, and accepting that maybe I'm not going to make a lot, but I'm going to make less, but then really dig. And I think that's really what you did, remaking, retuning, fine-tuning. And I think, Eva, you did something similar, although you didn't present it, but because you spent a lot of time preparing for more shots that you were going to animate, in doing the research for poses and things like that. You didn't really present that, but I think that's in a similar way, really focusing on in-depth research as opposed to doing more and more and more.
Yeah.
Would you say, how do you feel about that now?
It's really nice because you kind of get to really focus on small parts of your piece, and especially for me, because I'm working with puppets, it gave me the opportunity to really focus on each puppet and like figure out what its possibilities were, like considering like the range of movement that it had. So how far can the arms spread out, stuff like that. Because you're working with a physical puppet, so you have to take like actual gravity into account, which is very different from other forms of animation. So you have to make sure that if something like a hand is leading onto a table, it has to be actually stuck there, because it will move around all over the place otherwise. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to, for each shot, play around with it a little bit first before doing like your final shot, just so you can figure out where like the problems are and do some problem solving first instead of while you're doing like an animation on once or something.
Yeah. And just going back to what Baron just said about when Kira, you were working on your animatic, like you went through like several iterations. How did you eventually sort of like decide, or how did you even like manage that? How did you determine that this was like the final iteration?
I didn't. I just tried to make as many as I could and then see the best parts of what I had made and try to bring it into a final cut. But even now, like looking at it like 4 weeks later, there's still things that I would change. There's still things that I would do different. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so there's it in the end. The good thing is that it doesn't matter what decision you make as long as you make a decision. Because if you do something over and over and over, whatever you do doesn't weigh as much. So it's not a lot of pressure. So you can just do it because you're going to do a new one anyway. So whatever you're thinking of now is going to be different later. And that's actually a good thing in that scenario.
Yeah, yeah. I have a general question for all of you, because what we see a lot, I guess Barend has seen this more often than I have, but what we see a lot is that students are also very much stuck in this pre-production phase before they really start going into production. Do you have any tips of like getting out of that, or sort of like managing your time and sort of like making sure that you get everything done? Because there is so much to be done, right? When it comes to animation and so many choices to be made. But how do you go on to the actual production phase?
I guess like set small deadlines for yourself, because usually it's like, oh, it's like months from now. It's fine. I have so much time on my hands, and then
I know that so well.
And then it just flies by. So you have to really look at your planning and see like, oh, how can I divide it per month, per week, per day even, what you're gonna do, and then keep looking back at it as well. Like, don't make a planning at the start of your project and then just start, because then like a week in you look back at it and it's already not accurate anymore. So it's like a living document, and you have to keep adjusting it as you're going. Yeah, that will be my biggest tip.
I saw Zainab agree or not.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to have a good planning, and not only have it have it be a weekly planning thing where you describe what you want to do weekly, but a daily planning that really helps. So for example, I sort of set deadlines for myself per day. For example, for a specific shot, like I'll make this I'll start this shot on Monday, and then I want to finish it on Wednesday, for example, for just one version of the shot, of course. So a daily planning is really important, I think.
Yeah. I'm seeing that we have a question in the chat by Danny. What is the most valuable thing that you've learned during this project?
Know yourself and how much you can do within a day. Just planning. Organize yourself.
Yeah.
Would you say you were too optimistic in workload, or what was the?
I think in the first run I was way too optimistic, but at the same time I was slacking a lot. But in the recent, I was a lot more realistic about it, and I actually stuck to what I wanted to do in a week, which is great. I think there was only one point in which I was 2 days behind, but I somehow managed to get that back.
And I mean, planning is of course something. I think even yesterday, some of the students said, make a good planning, stick to it. I mean, that's sort of, but that's so abstract. Of course, what changed when you did the resit, and in that month you just said you had much more grip on the schedule and on the workload. And what changed? Because you were also saying in the beginning you were slacking, basically. I'm assuming not spending as many hours a day as you could, or
as I could changed? Or as I wanted to.
Yeah,
I think there was just a lot of things around me had changed. I had less to do at the same time because I didn't have practices anymore and that kind of stuff. So that was a big win. It helped.
Yeah.
And in general, I think I was just more, how do you say, I was more serious about it. I put more pressure onto myself. Not more pressure necessarily, but I took more responsibility for what I was doing. Because it's easy to say, oh, I don't have time for this. Oh, I still have 2 other things to do. And it's easy to look for excuses. And it's easy to just, I don't know, sometimes not get out of bed at all. But in order to get a grip on things, I had to sort of realize this is my thing. This is my responsibility, and I have to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah. How is that for you, Jarle?
If it's about planning, then well, yeah, it's always difficult. But going back to the question of Danny, would be for me that it's worth it to push through a certain technical barrier, which I always have walked against. And that was 3D software, and always avoided it because of the scariness of the technical stuff. But this time I just pushed through it enough that I finally got an understanding of it, and then you start to be more expressive. So yeah. That's worth it.
But that also requires planning, right? Like sort of like knowing how long you need to get to know a program and sit through the tutorials and then apply it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So at some point I just only looked up the stuff that I needed to know at that very moment and kept the rest out of it. So I was very selective in researching online specific things. And then I would find a video that would go elaborately about the whole thing, but I would just need a little piece of it. And I would watch it, keep it at that, and continue. And that worked quite great. So
that's in a way, that's very much about focusing and keeping the scope sort of under control, sort of to not have your project get away from you in a way, but really being in control over. And I see, funny enough, I mean, Kira is also laughing, I'm guessing, because that's so easy to happen that, your project becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, time never, multiplies. I mean, so.
Yeah. I'm also I see another question, a general question in the chat. Will any of these projects be developed any further after today? A question by Amanda.
Yes.
Yes?
My thing is going to be my graduation film.
Wow.
I'm going to finish it, front to back, backgrounds, colors, all of it.
Like fully animated?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
It's going to be terrible. To be fair, I cut a lot of stuff out in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
But it's still going to be great.
It's good that you already know which direction you want to go in and that you already have like a foundation then. Yeah. What about the rest? I think specifically for I'll go to Ava first and then return to you, Jarle. But specifically, Amanda asked, I'm wondering if I can see more of Ava's stop motion puppets.
Yeah, for this project, I'm because I have the puppets now, and I'm working on the story more at the moment because I still want to make it into more of a short film. But yeah, for that I'm now working on the story. But I will animate it at some point. But I'm also very busy at my internship now, where I'm also doing a bunch of animations and stuff like that, which hopefully I'll be also able to share as well on my Instagram and also on the Instagram of my
Cool.
my internship. So
Yeah.
I'll definitely have some more stop motion stuff coming online.
I also had a question about that. Like, so for every, maybe this is a stupid question, but for every stop motion film that you make, what do you do with all the puppets? What happens with them? I assume you don't throw them away, right?
No, that would be heartbreaking for me to throw them away. I don't have them here, unfortunately, because I moved only a few weeks back, so they're all at my parents' place at the moment. But yeah, I keep all of them.
Mm-hmm. So eventually you just have this room filled with puppets, different sizes and shapes, and
yeah, all of them
whole
kind
army.
of broken, but
still army of
yeah.
We call it the puppet graveyard.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's grim.
Well, that kind of is what it is, because with every shot you do, something breaks, be it a hand or whatever. Kind of depends what kind of armature is inside it, but
Right.
they break and they have to get repaired every time you want to animate something new with it. So that's a constant struggle.
And then you make a film with all the broken ones, how they wake up at night and try to eat you.
Oh god.
I think Kira is now sort of picking up everyone else's graduation project too. So.
Yeah.
Please no, I'm gonna die if I did all of that.
Jarle, what about you?
Yeah, well, a lot more experimentation in Blender for me, trying to get more atmospheric works in there. Yeah, the program itself will mostly be a tool, but definitely more atmospheric works that are.
But is it
similar vibe?
Yeah,
I hope to make some.
Are you thinking about sort of like exploring what you've just made, like Temple Ruin? Are you thinking about expanding the building, or sort of like making, or is this sort of like its own self-contained thing?
For now, it's its own self-contained thing, but I want to apply more historic themes in there in my work in the future. So
yeah, and more hurdy-gurdies, hopefully.
Oh God. I could not possibly not use it. It's just it really needs to be there.
If you own one, you might as well, right?
Yeah.
It costs too much money to waste.
It's a lifetime investment and like commitment. So
right.
There's two questions in the chat that I think would be, we can't miss. I think one is, did this project help you with your positioning? So maybe, I guess, to rephrase that, did it confirm who you thought you were as a image maker, animator, storyteller, or did it change how you look at your future? So maybe start with Zainab.
Yeah, for me, it really confirmed what I want to do in the future. I already knew that I really liked animating, especially the rough animation part. And for me, it really confirmed that I like that the most. I like the exploring, experimenting, and I also love just learning more. Every time you animate, you learn more. when you observe people or animals or whatever you're animating, every time you learn more. So it's also always really nice and inspiring to animate, I think, personally.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
That's
I mean, it shows in how you. Yeah. I mean, it's good to also feel, I guess, that you can do this day in, day out, because of course that's something you haven't done maybe until now, to really for such a long time really dig in. And then if you feel, okay, I can actually do this, then that's a good sign. Eva, I mean, I think you already hinted at, you live and breathe stop motion. I guess that you didn't stop doing that, obviously, after this project. So
yeah, I didn't start hating it still. So that was, for me, that at least that was very clear to me. Whether I really wanted to be like a puppet maker or an animator was still something that I was questioning a lot. At this point, I think I would say I'm foremost an animator, but it doesn't mean that I would stop making puppets, because it's still something that I enjoy a lot, and sometimes it's something that I just need, because investing in someone else making your puppet is also very expensive. But
yeah, and also my experience, I mean, I've never actually gone into stop motion, but I know generally in digital animation and rigging and things like that, it's really useful to be able to speak to the puppet maker from some experience. So if you're an animator, but you want to sort of consult with the puppet maker about what kinds of movements you need, it helps to have made these puppets and to have that experience. So even if you were to lean towards some level of specialization, it's really important to
exactly.
be able to speak that language.
It's still very useful, and it's been very learnful for me to know the actual construction of the puppets and like the inside of it. Not only to be able to talk to other people that I would work with, but also when animating, understanding if you grab a puppet, where to grab it and how it's moving from the inside to make it look how it should on the outside, basically.
And to make it not break, I guess.
Yeah.
Having that respect for the armature, I imagine it helps staying friendly with the puppet makers if you don't abuse the puppet, I guess.
Yeah.
Kira, did this project change how you look at, let's say, your future or your ambitions?
I think it more confirmed where I wanted to go. In the first run, I was kind of starting to doubt myself a little bit, like maybe I'm more of a character designer than anything else, so I tried to bring that in. But in my reset, that's when it really hit, like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to be a storyboarder / visual storyteller, whatever you want to call it. Animation director, I don't fucking know. But I was like, I want to do that. Or something along those lines.
Yeah. That immediately sort of then brings up the interesting question, if that's the focus you want to have, but you just propose to make I don't know how long, but let's say a couple of minutes of full-on animated sort of film for your graduation, do you imagine you would be working in a team for that? Or do you
I don't know yet. If I find some people who would love to just assist me, then yeah, sure. I'd love to have a team on hand. I mean, I do know that we kind of get to command the first years for like a week or two. And I'm definitely going to bring those guys through the grinder. But but for the most part, I do still enjoy animating. So yeah, in a sense, I still do want to show like, hey, I can do this.
Yeah. And Zainab, are you thinking about like working mostly by yourself or more in a team sort of like setting?
I actually really like working in a team, but only with people who are as motivated and passionate as me. So, for example, if we were working on a project together, then I would want everyone to, have their own voice in it and also throw ideas out there and be passionate about it. And then I think it can, can really be fun to work together like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Last question for all of you. What are you working on now? What's keeping you busy these days? I mean, I'm assuming it's internship, but where, what kind of internship do you have? Eva, let's start with you.
Yeah, I already talked about it a little bit, but so yeah, I'm doing my internship at P3 Animation, and it's a stop motion studio where they are mainly specialized in like fabricating the actual puppets. So I get to learn a bit about that, but there's also like they have their own like cabinets filled with awesome puppets that I get to abuse a little bit and make some tests with. So it's really awesome. Yeah.
Cool. Kira?
I'm interning with a man called Yalun Paul Lee, but he's also called Dazzling Images. Like that's his little one-man company, so to speak. But yeah, I'm mostly using my own project in order to learn more before, which is sort of like my boot camp before it's going to go into next month's project, which is going to be a big thing. It's going to be a big storyboarding project for this martial arts epic from China. So that'll be great. I hope. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere because sometimes these kinds of things can like you do the storyboarding and everything, and eventually the project loses funding, so it never really comes out. But you still get paid for the work you did, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. Jarle.
Yeah, I'm currently interning at Eurobuk in Rotterdam. It's a small company, and also with another student from here, so that's fun. I'm currently working on a explain animation, also for the hogeschool. And yeah, mostly character animation, which is fun because I wanted to focus on that more, and I get to do that in a bit more commercial context here, and that's pretty fun. Getting the technical stuff down and having fun with character animation currently. And there will most likely be some other cool projects in the future. And yeah.
Yeah, nice. And lastly, Zainab.
I'm interning at Martin Spy. I'm helping with her short film called Trouble in Mind, and I'm her director assistant, so I help with a lot of different things, which is really nice. And I'm also learning Toon Boom actually, which is really challenging because it's so different from the software I usually work with. It's it's very challenging because it's like a mix of After Effects, TV Paint, and actually some 3D programs. But yeah, then mixed, and it's it's really nice to learn new software. So that's always a plus.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning a lot about that now. The animator is actually helping me, sort of showing me the ropes of how they do the animation for this project and what the animation pipeline is like. So I think it's very interesting, and I get a nice perspective on what it's like to be a director.
Very nice. Sounds like you're all really doing great things. Yeah, thanks so much again for sharing your work and for answering some questions. Definitely feels like it's the beginning of something. So I'm really excited to see more pirates and more fighting and more crafting. I'm excited to see what the next steps are going to be for all of you. So yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing your work. Let me just switch to this. Thank you also for being here and for watching the stream. Thank you for the questions. Also, you, Almighty God, did not forget you. So if you're interested in seeing more animations, or maybe that's not the best way of phrasing it, tomorrow we'll be actually looking at what happens when animation students pick up a camera rather than like their good old trusted tablets or their pens. So we'll be looking at more of a mixed media and live action sort of like products or works. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Like what is the main difference between live action and animation, or what are the similarities? So yeah, if you're interested, please tune in. It's going to happen again at 8 o'clock. And if you want to know more about these lovely makers, please check out the Major Things Instagram, where you can find their handles and you can see a little bit more about their work. So yeah, hope to see you all tomorrow.
Yeah.
Woo!
Oei.
Excellent.
Whee!
Was it
did
as
it.
bad as you feared, or was it
Nou,